Welcome to the Communication Queens podcast for the visionary leaders, speakers, service providers, and podcasters who are looking to stand out sharing their story. I'm your host, Kimberly Spencer, former screenwriter turned master communications coach. On this podcast, I'll be coaching you on how to share your own transformation story so that you increase your visibility, influence, and income on podcast interviews. Let's get your voice heard. Hello and welcome back to the Communication Queens podcast. I am your host, Kimberly Spencer, founder of the Communication Queens agency. We are a revolutionary podcasting agency where we are doing strategic matchmaking like a mofo because brand awareness is BS without sales, and that is what we help to do. And that is why this Communication Queen Quickie is all about aligned sponsorships. So I have seen this incredibly limiting belief in the podcasting world about generating sponsorships. And I think sponsorships is just as easy as strategic matchmaking for guests in making sure that we align our guests with podcasts that have an audience that can possibly gain from their services. And so having spoken and worked with a lot of podcasters, I have seen such a problem with podcasters struggling with this limiting belief of sponsorships, that like sponsorships are really hard to find, really hard to get. You have to have a certain amount of followers, downloads per episode, etc., to be able to get sponsorship. And I will say that I know people who have gotten sponsorships from 1,000 downloads, like 1,000 total downloads, not 1,000 downloads per episode, 1,000 downloads. And why this can work is because, yes, that sponsorship was not like Audible or ButcherBox or some giant megalith of a company sponsoring the podcast, but it was an aligned partnership. You see, podcasting, 3 out of 4 people tune in to learn something new. And when you're building a podcast relationship with your audience as a host, it's an intimate relationship. There is a connection and there's a depth of connection and an intimacy between the podcaster and their audience. And I hope you're feeling the intimacy right now. So there's an intimacy in this medium. It's a very intimate medium. And so that is why when you give recommendations as a podcaster for a service, for a potential sponsor, your audience is far more likely to buy into that than just like seeing a Facebook ad. And so savvy business owners will see this opportunity. And if you have a service or a product that you like, think of all the services and products that you like and explore, are there people, companies selling services like that could use a little bit of brand awareness? And if you have an audience, and I've seen this with an audience as small as 1,000 downloads, like 1,000 downloads, where people see the value in a small niche audience, oof, there is sponsorship potential right there. So for example, I was having a conversation with a speaking coach, and she had a podcast that's all about best friends. And she's like, yeah, but wait, I don't know how to monetize it and whatnot. And I said, why not look for businesses, small businesses that are built by 2 best friends? Because her podcast she did it with her best friend. She connected with her best friend, the audience that like best friends would tune in and listen to it together, all about things that best friends do. And they did a best friend retreat. I said, why not find other businesses that were created by 2 best friends and showcase those businesses? And that allowed her to scale her podcast. So look at the services and products that you use or the topic of conversation around your podcast, and look at who else provides a similar service, who could be a power partner, who could be an ally in what it is that you want to promote. So for example, maybe you're not an author, but there is a certain book that has come out and you love that book. You can always reach out to the author, just like you would reach out to a podcast and say like, come on, can I be on your podcast? You can always reach out to an author and say, I have an audience of this many people. We get this many downloads. I loved your book. I already talk about it. What if we structured a sponsorship deal and I did a commercial for you? Those are potential opportunities. If you find books that you just love, that is a potential sponsorship opportunity because podcast listeners are learners. 3 out of 4, 75% of people who listen to podcasts listen to learn something new. They are also readers. So you are very likely as an author to get your book out there. And so this also works for authors if you want to go flip it the other way. Authors, if you have a book that is out there and you know some podcasts that you would be a really strong fit for that resonate with the title, the topic of your book, then offer to sponsor their podcast because their listeners will be tuning in and interested in that opportunity. So yes, you can guest on their show. That's a possibility for growth. But you can also offer to have your book sponsor their podcast. And so yes, this does take a little money up front, but how much could you make with having an aligned audience who tunes in for 20 minutes to learn about something and topics that are aligned with what your book is about? So I hope this served for podcasters. I hope this served for authors. If it did, share this with an author or a podcaster friend who could possibly be an aligned sponsor. And always, we love the reviews. Thank you so much for them coming in. I am so honored. And please keep them coming. Every review helps us spread this standard of generosity in the podcasting world. And I am so excited to have this value spread like wildfire and for everyone to rise together in mutual abundance. So remember to own your voice because your voice deserves to be visible and it has value. Till next time.
Thank you so much for listening. If you love this episode, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. For more tips on guest podcasting, storytelling, and communication strategies, follow us on social media at Communication Queens Agency and visit us at communicationqueens.com. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And in the meantime, remember, your story has the power to save one life. Let your story and your voice be heard.